What is emotional literacy? The answer to that question coming right up. I'm Ron with LeadSkill. We help leaders of small companies and teams get better results through people. Now, my experience applying these concepts is mostly in the workplace, but I have to say that this lesson today especially applies even at school, in nonprofit environments, in government, in healthcare, at home especially. And so what we're going to talk about with emotional literacy has wide applications, far beyond the places where I'm normally speaking with leaders and using this. So what is emotional literacy? First of all, let's establish that this is part of a bigger field called emotional intelligence. In fact, emotional literacy, you could see it as it's kind of the first step, the essential skill that lies behind good emotional intelligence. And if you want to understand more about emotional intelligence, I have another video in this series that you can check out. So go search for that. Let me start by saying the analogy of emotional literacy comes from language, obviously, language literacy. And most of us realize that if you're literate in a language, it means that you can read and you can write in that language. Now, with emotions, applying that, it's not exactly the same thing as being able to read and write emotion, right? But the idea of emotional literacy, I think, still stands. Let me begin with giving a definition. Emotional literacy is being able to understand emotions, your own and others' emotions, well enough that you can use that knowledge to make better choices. You can take action in an effective way with it. So let's unpack that a little bit and let's look at it. Returning to the analogy with language, you can understand, in fact, be fluent in a language orally without being literate in it, without being able to read and write in it. I think back to my experience not real long ago, whenever I was living in China for a couple of years. When I was there, I came across other foreigners. Some of them didn't even learn Chinese while they were there, and they were limited in their interactions to people who could just speak or understand their language, usually English. But there were also other foreigners who didn't really learn much Chinese, and they had to use intermediaries, people who understood their language and could speak to them. I also met a class of foreigners who actually learned spoken Chinese, which contrary to what people may think, is not incredibly difficult. It is a tonal language, so that's different if you're coming from a Western basis where we don't really use tonal differences in speaking. But you can learn Chinese. The grammar is very simple compared to Western languages. The vocabulary is a little challenging, but you can speak it. The real difficulty for a lot of foreigners learning Chinese is the written language, because the characters, there's thousands of them. It's not like you learn 26 letters or a real limited set of letters and then you can really decipher just about anything as you can in many languages that use an alphabet. So the point is that not being literate in a language, yes, you can still function, but it also cuts you off from being able to interact on deeper levels, and there's just certain things that are cut off from you. I'm thinking in terms of language, if you just think about it a little bit, someone who is fluent in speaking a language but is not literate in it, well, they can't obviously read and write. Those are things that are cut off from them. But what does reading and writing allow you to do? It allows you to learn from people that you're not immediately in their presence. Well, let's think, for example, what about someone who's already dead? I can communicate with William Shakespeare because I can read the things that he wrote, and I can understand those things through reading the plays that he wrote. So he's been dead for 400 years now. So same idea. People who are not immediately present, we can learn from them or be entertained by them. Those are some things that being literate in a language opens up to you. There's also just certain skills, just getting around, navigating everyday life. Again, thinking back to whenever I was living in China, whenever foreigners who don't speak Chinese or don't read and write Chinese They're kind of at the mercy of their taxi driver being able to understand. Now, if they have a local friend, they can have them write an address in Chinese. They give it to the taxi driver, and most times they get where they want to go. But if the taxi driver, as you often encounter, isn't so familiar with the neighborhood you're going to, or they can't read the handwriting, it gets really tricky. And I often found that taxi drivers, even when I spoke Chinese and could read and write, sometimes before they knew that, they would try to take advantage of the situation, maybe up the fare, take me the long way. And when I could read the street signs and say, hey, wait a minute, we need to go this way, or this is where I'm headed, then I was able to get to my destination quicker, and I wasn't at the mercy of someone else who had a skill. They were one up on me. Let's think about emotional literacy. So how does this apply? If you are literate in emotions, if you understand emotions, both your own and other people's, and you can use that understanding in such a way that you can take better action, or you have more choices open to you, well, you have a lot more ability to not act like a tourist or a foreigner in a strange land, the land called emotions. So we all have emotions every day. And so you can, in fact, be fluent in emotion language, but not literate in it. And so what's that distinction? What does that really mean? Being able to read our emotions, being able to put words and language and vocabulary to it, that's one of the distinctions that makes you more emotionally literate. Being able to read other people's emotions and what's going on for them, and not just at the superficial level, but what's behind the emotion, what's pushing it, or what's the motivating factor behind it. That's another part of emotional literacy. And then being able to take better actions because of this understanding, putting that to use, that really starts getting into emotional intelligence. And so emotional literacy is the essential first skill of gaining better emotional intelligence. Now, I'm going to go into more of this in another video about how do you improve, or how do you develop your emotional literacy. But let me give you a couple of tips just right now to get started. One of those is you can increase your awareness or your observation about what's going on in the emotional domain, the emotional sphere. You can start with yourself, start paying attention more to what you're feeling, what happened to trigger those feelings, and what you're doing with those feelings consciously, if anything, to manage it better. So start just being aware, and start being aware, watching other people, get better at people reading. So awareness is the first step. The second thing you can do is increase your vocabulary, is get better at using language to manage emotions, to get fluent with emotions, and then to manage them better. There's some ideas for today, and I hope that you have gained some ideas about emotional literacy and also its value within the larger field of emotional intelligence. If this has been helpful for you, subscribe to our channel and leave us a comment. Engage in the conversation below. I'd like to know where you see yourself in terms of emotional literacy, and whether this whole idea is helpful for what you're trying to do on a day-to-day basis. We'll talk to you more in our next episode, and I hope you'll join us to continue this conversation.